Hey guys, in the next couple of minutes, what I'm going to be teaching you is how all famous artists use certain blueprints and formulas when it comes to creating their own music. So what do I mean by this? Well, if I was to say to you, who's your favorite artist right now? And you might say David Guetta or Martin Garrix. Well, if I was to go and play you a Martin Garrix track that you've never heard before, there's a high chance, because you're a fan of his, you'd say, I've never heard this track, but it sounds like it could be a Martin Garrix track, right? And the reason is that he's using certain sounds, certain effects, and doing certain things in all of his tracks that give him a certain style, right? This is actually a really important bit of becoming famous for making music, is having a sound that people relate to you. So without further ado, let's just jump in to Ableton right here, and I'm going to give you an example of this. So what I've got is 4 Martin Garrix tracks, and these tracks were some of his tracks from the early days. And what I've done is I've lined them all up next to each other so the drop hits at exactly the same time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play a little section of each of these tracks, and what I want you to start thinking to yourself is, can I hear a similarity between these tracks? Does it sound like he might have been using a formula or a blueprint when creating these? So this is track number 1. This is track number 2. And I'll play one more, track number 3. Can you begin to hear these similarities between each of these tracks? Can you tell that there's certain things that are happening in each of these tracks that's making them sound similar? Now, just in case you can't hear it, what I'm going to do is one last thing where I'm actually going to flick through each of these tracks as they all play at the same time, and notice how they could almost sound like they could all be the same track. Let me just have a quick flick through this and have a listen. How incredible is that? And this is something that a lot of people who start making dance music or haven't started making dance music don't actually realize, is that there's very specific formulas at play, especially when you start looking at very specific kind of genres of music, like tech house music or drum and bass or liquid drum and bass. In fact, it's these little nuances that actually make a track fit into a certain category. All tech house music will have a similar sound to it because there's certain things going on in all tech house music. So the next question is, how could you begin to use this to help you fast track your music career where you can start making really professional music? Well, I'm going to show you how to do this right now. So first things first, just in case you're brand new, because I know a lot of people on my channel are really DJs and not actually producing their own music yet. You want to go and get a program called Ableton. It's a program that a lot of professional DJs use to produce their own tracks, from James Hype, David Guetta, the list goes on. Just come to ableton.com. You can come and click try a free trial here. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by telling you how to download stuff. And the other thing you want to do is come to a website called splice.com. Splice is where you can go and get professional sounds. So you could, for example, type in things like, a tech house kick or a big room kick or whatever genre you're kind of making, and you can get kicks, claps, top loops, bass lines. You can get all sorts on here. So in a bit, when I start showing you some drum loops, you'll know where I got these sounds from. Now, let's go back to this and let's just take one of these tracks. For example, let's just take Animal. So I'm going to get these lanes here. And by the way, just to run you through this in case you are brand new, when you first arrive on Ableton, it'll probably look a little bit like this. Just come to this screen here by clicking this button up here, and this is called the arrangement view, which is where you can arrange a project. Now what we're going to do is we're going to just go and get an audio lane. So it'll say at the end, you'll see it'll say audio lane like this. And what we want to do to start is we want to drag in a track. So you're just going to get a Martin Garrix track or whatever track you want to be able to make, tech house, drum and bass, whatever it is, right? And you're just going to literally drag the file off your computer straight into Ableton like this and drag it over that lane, okay? And what we're going to do before we do that is we're also going to do a little bit of research, because we've got to make sure that this track that we're bringing into Ableton is the same speed as the Ableton project. If we come up to the top right hand corner here, if I can find my freaking mouse, there it is. We've got it set to 127. So the first thing we might want to do is come back to this. We'll type in Martin Garrix, animals, BPM and key, like this. Okay, it's just a really easy way to do it, and it'll say the tempo of the track is 128. So before you drag in the track, what we want to do is just come up to the top here and set this to 128, like that. Then we're going to drag in animals. So let's just do it like this. So we've got this one. I'm just going to drag this to the top here. And the first thing you're going to do is double click on it and then come and turn warp off. Okay. Now warp is a really interesting thing. The way it works in Ableton is there's obviously, you can set this to whatever speed you like, but you can also come and get pre-made loops, like a loop that sounds like this. Right? Now if I was to take that loop and drag it onto this audio lane, Ableton will automatically warp it to the speed of the project. So if I listen to it here, but if I was to turn this down to 100 BPM, that beat will still go to 100 BPM. It's been warped to the speed of the project. Right? Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because we don't actually want Ableton to attempt to warp the Martin Garrix track to the speed. We want to make sure that we've got the project exactly right. So we're going to drag it in, turn warping off and put it to 128. And we want to now make sure that it is actually going to the right speed of the project. The reason I'm talking about this a lot is because you've got to make sure this bit is right, because in a moment we're going to start analyzing this track, looking at the structure, looking at drum beats and stuff. And if your song that you have dragged in as a reference track is not to the beat of the project, it's going to throw everything off. So this is really important. And I'm going quickly because I want to maintain this the interest of this video, right? So here we go. Martin Garrix, turned off warp. We're going to click this button up here, which will turn a metronome on. And we just want to listen to see if this project sounds like it's going to the beat, to the metronome. Is the beat going properly? And if you can't really hear the metronome, just turn it down here. So I could hear that the beat was going perfectly, and I can also kind of see that the project is going to the beat properly, because I can see different phrases and different sections of the song are happening perfectly to the grid. I can visually see it, right? Now we know that this is right. We can turn the metronome back off because it's kind of annoying. And what we're going to do is we're now going to come and warp it now. The reason I warp it now is because maybe later on in the project, I might want to make my track 125 BPM, and you'll see that it now will stick to the grid. We now want it to be warped. Now we know we've got it right. Okay, cool. Now, let's go back to the whole formula thing. So one of the things I find whenever I'm teaching students who I work with students on a 6-month project to teach them everything they need to know about producing professional dance music. If you are interested in working with me, underneath this video I'll leave a link that you can go and you can apply to work with me. But without further ado, let's kind of get back into this. The thing I find that a lot of the students I work with struggle with when they first start is working out song structure and working out the drums, right? So I'm just going to kind of show you this in this project. What you can do is you can zoom in on the project by coming up to the top, and there's a little magnifying glass, or I've got a mouse which I can kind of pinch and squeeze. So I'm going to zoom in here. And what we want to do is figure out the different sections of a song. So I can put my mouse here, and there'll be a blue line just by clicking here, and I can click set, which will create a marker. Now I know with dance music there is, if I rename this, an intro. And I'm going to set another marker here just for now, and I'm going to click set, and I'm going to hit this button here, and I'm going to rename this, rename that breakdown, because this is how it typically works. There's an intro, there's a breakdown, there's a build typically in most dance music, so we're going to go build, and then we're going to go to the next bit, which is a drop. We've all heard of that before, the build and the drop, so I'm going to put that in there, and I'm going to put drop here like this. And then in the second half of the track, there's like a second breakdown, a second build, a second drop, and then outro drums. But for speed, I'm just going to do these first few. So we know the intro is going to go right at the beginning of the project. So I can pretty much drag that right to the start there. I'm going to now go and look for the drop, right? Because that's kind of like the second most obvious bit. So I'm guessing this is the drop here. So I'm just going to put my mouse here and hit spacebar, which will play it. Okay, so that point there is the drop. So I'm just going to drag that to this point here. So that's the drop. We're now going to look for the build, the bit where it starts building to the drop. Let's have a listen. There's the build, so I'm going to put that in there. And now we're going to look for the breakdown. The breakdown is the bit where it kind of goes quiet just after the intro drums. So there's the breakdown. So what we've now got is the intro, the breakdown, the build, the drop, and of course there's additional bits going on in here. You know, but this is all part of, like, you know, the intro, the breakdown, you know. And, you know, I'm going to leave that there for now because I'm going to just kind of show you a top level stuff. But just to note, actually, let's not bother with that. Let's just get on with the structure. So, as you can see, if I was to now take this and delete this lane, what I've now got is the intro, the breakdown, the build, the drop. And if I'd done that the whole way through the track, I would have the exact same structure as Martin Garrix. This is why this is really, really powerful. Now, the other thing which I want to show you in this video as well is how you could begin to borrow other ideas, okay? Because here's the thing, if you want to fast track your journey in terms of making music, what you want to do is take music that you already like and begin modeling the music that you are making on the music that you already like. Because if you can make a track that's using all those kind of same elements, same drums, same kind of bass, then what you'll be left with at the end is a track that sounds very, very similar to a track that inspired you to make the music in the first place. The big issue that a lot of people make when they start making dance music is they kind of start with a blank canvas and they go through the whole thing guessing and going, well, I guess I'll put a drum beat in here and this is an idea. And they just have this long idea that doesn't have any structure, doesn't really go anywhere, and it's not really a song. And then they get frustrated and moved on to the next track, and that's not really a song either. So by doing this, what you're doing is fast tracking the journey. You're borrowing a song structure. You could use this exact same song structure for your next 12 tracks. This track has got billions of views online and on Spotify. If it's that successful, just use the same song structure every time, okay? So now we got to start delving into the track and figuring out what kind of things Martin Garrix has done here that's made this track work so well. And a great way to start is the drums. So we might want to kind of think to ourselves, well, what kind of drum pattern has he got? So what we'll do is we'll just go and listen to the drop here. Well, he's just got a drum going dum, 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 right? So what I would do potentially at this point is I would just go and look for, because this track is big room house, you could go and look for a big room kick, right? And you would do that on Splice. You would just come to Splice, go back, and you would just come to here and just go to sounds and type in big room kick, right? Click enter, and it'll play a load of these kind of big room. Well, yeah, you could have a listen to that. And you could go and get one of these kicks and drag it in. I already have a kick, so I'm just going to go and find that now. Give me a second. So if I go to kicks, and I could potentially type in here big room kicks. So I could drag that in, right? Now let's just say, for example, it was just one individual kick that looked like this. I could listen to this, and I could get this sample here, and I want to just make sure that this sample is the same. It goes to one beat, okay? So you've got to make sure it's at least one beat long, and I want to make sure that that one clip is exactly one beat long. So the way I do it is I would drag it so it was either to here if it was a bit shorter, or if it's longer, I drag it back to this point here. And I'm just going to hit Apple or Control J, which will consolidate it and make sure it's just that length, okay? Once I've done this, I can hit loop, and now I can drag this beat out like this, right? And so if we listen to it, we've now got that drum that Martin Garrix has used here. Right, so we've now taken that. Now what I can do is I can drag that the entire length of the track if I want to, right? And then we'll go and have a quick listen to if there's anything else being used here. There's not, but sometimes in house tracks what you get is like a clap that's been put in. So typically there's a clap on every other kick drum. Sometimes there's hi-hats in place. So I mean, just they haven't used it in this song, but just because I want to show you this, I actually want to jump in and show you. So let's say I'm just going to go, and again, you would download these samples off Splice. I can go to all folders here, and let's just go to kicks actually, and I'm going to go to claps. So I'm going to drag a clap onto a new lane. I'm going to track hi-hats onto another lane. So typically what happens is there's a kick and there's a clap on every other kick drum. Okay, so you'll go and get a clap sample of Splice, and again you could type in tech house clap or big room clap or whatever, you know. You put it on every other kick, and again you want to make sure it's the same length. So say your sample is that length, you want to draw over both these areas because it happens on every other, and then you're going to hit Apple J and it consolidates it to that length. So now you can hit loop and drag this out, right? So now you'd have a kick and a clap. Now, of course, Martin Garrix track doesn't have a clap, but I'm just showing you this because typically house music does. And then the same thing with a hi-hat. Typically, you'll find that there's a hi-hat between every kick drum, right? So the hi-hat would go about here, and again, doesn't really apply for big room house. You do the same thing, you'd loop, you'd Apple J, you'd hit Apple J, you could hit loop like this and just drag this out. And if Martin Garrix track had a hi-hat, you could also add this in. Like this, okay. Anyway, now I've shown you this, and I'm kind of riffing here, but you know, I just want to show you stuff. Now, the next thing would be, let's say, for example, there was a clap and there was a hi-hat. I probably haven't picked the best example here because there's not a huge amount going on with Martin Garrix's drums, I don't think, in this track. We would loop it all the way out. Now we're going to go in and start listening to his original track and decide where do his kick drums come in, where is his kick drum taken away. So we'd be listening. Well, we can actually hear a clap here. Dum, clap, dum, clap. So we can hear a kick drum and a clap. And we're going to listen to where that kick drum and clap ends. So at this point, the kick drum and the clap is no longer there. So I can click on this clip and click Apple E or Control E, and Apple E here and Apple E here. Now there weren't any hi-hats at this bit. So I'm going to remove the hi-hats because they weren't there. And we can tell from this point on, there was no drum and no claps. So I'm going to remove these, just drag it along. You can just go over the edge and just drag it along. And we're going to listen to his track and see where the kick drum comes back in. There's no kick drum here, but what we can hear is a clap, 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 clap. Have a listen. So what we might do is we might come into this bit here and we can hear there's a clap on every beat. Listen. Clap, right? So we might go and get our clap. I'm just going to draw over the area that we need and drag it over here. So it'd be clap, and then there's another clap, right? So I'm just going to hit Apple J, loop, and then just drag it out. Oh, no. So see what happened there? I hadn't consolidated it, so I got to click on it like this, Apple J. Now when I hit loop, it will now loop out. So now we've got that clap that we can hear. But there's no kick drum still, so that's got to be moved all the way along, right, until it comes back in at the drop. So there's no kick drum at the beginning. So we can tell, but at this point there is a clap. So we've got our clap coming in here. Right? And what begins to happen is you can begin to map out your entire track. So we'd be listening to it here and we'd say, okay, well, where does the kick drum end? It ends there. So we're going to get rid of that and move it along. We might even listen in the drop and see, well, does the kick drum go the whole way through the drop? There's no kick drum there, so I can highlight this area here and just remove the drums from there. And as you begin to do this, you will create a full track where you've put in the drums, put in any percussion, and as you can begin to see that if you continue doing this throughout the whole track, you could really go into detail here. You could say, okay, well, what else is going on in the intro? Well, I can hear that thing going, woo, right? That's one element. So I can maybe go and add in some sort of vocal or some sort of melody in there. I can hear the digga 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 digga. So that's another element I can add in. And what I get a lot of my students to do is actually come in here and analyze every single sound they can hear. So not only would they put intro, but they might add in here all the different elements. They might say, well, they can hear a kick drum. They can hear that vocal going, woo. They can hear the digga 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 digga, right? And even if you don't know what that sound is, I always say just make a note of it. Then you get to the breakdown and you make a note of all the different sounds you can hear. You can hear here. So it's like this kind of crash sound. So that was perhaps where we'd go and we'd get a crash sound and put it in here, right? There's a clock sound, so we could potentially go and get a clock sound that we could potentially put into our track. Well, there's a melody in there, so maybe we could go and put a melody in this point here. And what happens is, as you start going through, you're not necessarily copying his track. The end result here is that we're not ending up with another version of Animals, but we are listening to the different sounds that he has used in this track that might help us recreate a track that sounds similar. So, and I will actually kind of just, because if you're still here, you probably do find this interesting. Let's say we went to the drop. Well, all I can hear here is a kick drum and a melody that sounds like it's using a plucked sound, right? And again, one of the beauties of working with me is you might say, well, I don't know what these sounds are, right? How do you know that's a plucked sound? Well, if you work with me on a mentorship, you actually get my phone number, so you can message me and say, hey, Phil, at 30 seconds into Martin Garrix track, what is that sound? And I can text you back that day. That's the beauty of like working with a mentor for this kind of stuff. But I just want to show you what we've got here is I'm actually going to remove these lanes. I can hear Martin Garrix drop. He's got a kick drum and a melody. And it's a plucked melody. So what I might want to do is go and find a plucked sound and create a melody myself. Now again, I don't want to get this too complicated, but there's audio and MIDI when it comes to producing music. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right click and I'm going to add a MIDI file. Okay. So actually I know the shortcut, which is Apple Shift T, and it creates a MIDI. And what we're going to do is we're just going to draw in a MIDI for 1 bar. Actually, this was 1 bar, so we'll do 4 bars, okay? I'm going to right click here, and I'm just going to say insert MIDI clip, okay? Now, what I've got here is a piano roll where I can draw whatever notes I want, and those notes will play, right? So the way this works again is you now have to add a synthesizer on. So I've got a synthesizer which I really like called Nexus. Just going to drop it on here. And what I want to do now is go and look for maybe like a plucked sound. So I'm going to type in pluck, and there's one. I've got to solo this so I can actually hear it. And that sounds really similar, doesn't it? So I could click on this. And now if I wanted to, I could come and just put in a sound. Now I can see that this kick is in D. And again, I know this is all a bit complicated at this point, but I just want to make sure I'm using the D note. So I could just come and draw in some notes. Right? And you can see how I can now draw in whatever I wanted. And again, you can move these around. You could, you know. And you get the idea. I'm not going to be able to create a masterpiece for you on the spot right now, but it wouldn't take me long to move these notes around and come up with something kind of cool. So you can see what I've done is I'm not exactly copying animals. I'm using it to inspire me, to help me recreate a track that sounds similar by analyzing his track, analyzing the blueprints, the formulas and stuff that he is doing in order to help me create a track. So I would urge you right now to go and pick 3 or 4 of your favorite tracks, put them into Ableton, go and get a version of it and start just analyzing it. Like, what are the different sounds? And the thing you will find amazing is the songs you've picked probably have very similar structures, have very similar sounds in them, using similar noises. And then once you've got that, go to Splice, start downloading some of these sounds. Like, of course, you could go to Splice and download Plucked Sounds if you wanted to, right? Download them, start throwing them in, start putting together structures, and within no time at all, you'll be able to start creating full tracks that sound like they could have come from the artist that inspired you to start in the first place. So there we go, guys. As I'm going to leave that video there because I don't want to turn this into this mammoth thing. Although if you are interested in me perhaps going through and creating a whole track, just let me know in the comments below. And as I mentioned, if you are interested in working with me on this mentorship program, just click the link below. I'll give you an opportunity to fill out a form where you can apply to work with me over a 6-month period. And the thing about this program is it's not just kind of like tutorials that are similar to this. It's also the actual feedback you get from me, being able to jump on, have me listen to your music, review it, show you how you could improve it, show you how to close the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Also the kind of accountability thing, having me there, pushing you, telling you what to do, how to grow you to that next level in your career, how to start getting more streams. It's really freaking awesome. So yeah, if you're interested, fill out the form below, and yeah, hopefully you enjoy the video, and I'll create another one very soon. Speak to you soon. Ciao.